This is the primary document screencast, so you are probably going to receive one of three of these readings and be asked to work in a group. The readings are here with the accompanying questions. So we'll be looking at these particular documents and see why they are significant for the American involvement in Vietnam. So you're going to read, share, and prepare for questions. It's kind of where we're at. So we've already looked at this particular timeline. What I'm trying to do here is to get you to think about this time period right here and how there just seems to be a lot going on. The civil rights movement, the turbulent 60s, the Vietnam War, and all of this is happening while the Cold War is going on. So we know that by the late 1960s, there seems to be a lot of issues with the Vietnam War. Here's an image of Napalm Girl, the Tet Offensive. So 1968 definitely seems to be a significant year, somewhere around here, where there just seems to be a lot of issues going on in society, which is going to lead to Lyndon Johnson deciding not to take the Democratic Party's nomination. Here we see an image of the Kent State massacre, where college students were protesting, which led to the death of protesters. And that's what you see in the photograph. The Vietnam War also has an indirect connection to the Cambodian genocide, as well as the My Lai massacre. So there definitely seems to be a war with historic significance for the United States, as well as the Vietnamese people. So here we see some of the questions that you are going to be asked to complete in class. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I will take a look at the documents and try to get you to think about some of the items. So for the most part, you want to think that this section here, the anti-French resistance, so this is at the point where the Vietnamese have tension with the French because the French controlled Indochina. And here we see their claims that they are making. Notice here that they're making a reference to Wilson. This is a reference to Wilson and his 14 points where he argued about self-determination. So I guess from the author's point of view here, the Vietnamese people have a right to self-determination. Why? Because Wilson said so in the 14 points. Here we see the phrase self-determination. Here they're talking about the victory of the Allies. So this definitely seems to be a document with connections to World War I. And here they are outlining the issues with regard to the French. So the authors of this particular piece feel that the Vietnamese are being oppressed by the French. So I'm going to put French versus people of Vietnam. And here you see some of the claims against them, that they have freedom of assembly, travel abroad, the judicial system, and somewhere in here it talks about their resources. Now we move on. After time of waiting and study, we realize that the Wilson Doctrine we mentioned before, the 14 points, was but a fraud. The liberation of the proletariat. This is interesting because here they're saying the liberation of the proletariat is necessary for the conditions of national liberation. So the question here that always comes up is, was the Vietnamese fight for independence one about communism, or was it one of national liberation? Or was the liberation of the proletariat necessary because national liberation was constantly denied, as this document kind of hints at? Here we see the Vietnamese Declaration of Independence. So this is from Ho Chi Minh, the North Vietnamese, and they're sending this to gain support from the United States. And they are utilizing the model of the Declaration of Independence, but they're renaming it the Vietnamese Declaration of Independence. Notice here how they're saying all men are created equal, and it just pretty much follows that path. So if you were to look at the Declaration of Independence, instead of using they have, the Declaration of Independence says he has, and it is a reference to all of the crimes that the king has committed against the colonists. So here they're substituting he with they. The they is a reference to the French, and then they just kind of list all of their complaints. As they move on, you get to the end. Let's see. They kind of outline their fight. Here they talk about the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. So it's pretty much the Vietnamese saying that they are separating themselves from Vietnam. They are they're separating from the French. It's ultimately what is going on in this document. Here we see the Conference on Guerrilla Warfare. Notice the date. So this is explaining how the French are going to, how the Vietnamese are going to fight against the French. They are not going to meet the Vietnamese army against the French army. Instead, they are going to use what's called guerrilla warfare, which means they are going to pretty much attack here, and then they're going to take a break, and they're going to harass the French. So this is during the French Indochina War, the war between France and Vietnam. As they're telling you here, they're going to engage in guerrilla warfare, and they outline kind of what their soldiers are going to be asked to do. Uh, they want to make sure that their soldier is not just fighting, but that their soldier also, the Vietnamese soldier, has an understanding of the politics, that this is a war for liberation. It's not a war that you're fighting just for survival. This is a war that has a greater cause, the liberation of the Vietnamese people. And that's why they want the Vietnamese soldier to know the history, to know what this war is about. In comparison to the French, who are probably just looking at this as a war for survival. And here they get into some of the strategies. As they mention here, the aim of guerrilla warfare is not to wage large scale battles and win big victories. They want to nibble at the enemy. They want to harass him and wear him down physically and mentally, and to eventually annihilate them. So that is the approach that they're taking in this conference on guerrilla warfare. That's the approach. And again, this is during the French Indochina War with Vietnam.